Hi there, and welcome to onlinebookreview.org. I am your host, Stacy Cochran, and we are joined with an excellent author here via Skype Video Call. Mike Hicks is the author of In Her Name. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike.
Well, thanks, Stacy, for having me.
Well, tell our audience a little bit about your book, In Her Name.
Well, In Her Name is a science fiction fantasy novel that is a bit unusual because it's not easily pigeonholed. It goes into science fiction, has some traditional, high fantasy elements, but also blends in a little romance and political intrigue. It's a fairly long novel that I'm currently actually breaking up into three individual standalone books at this point. And it's available for, purchase on Kindle and in print and so on. Now, the book actually I just published last year, what I'm calling the omnibus version now. But I actually had written that almost 12 years ago, and it took 4 years to write. So that's a little bit about it in a nutshell.
It sounds.
Sure how much detail you want.
Well, that sounds great. One of the questions that I had was what is included in the omnibus edition, and I see you've got 3 different titles. So this is a big, epic, sweeping fantasy that you have, basically.
Yes.
So
yes.
what all is included in the omnibus edition?
Well, the omnibus includes 3 novels entitled Empire, Confederation, and Final Battle, and they're essentially exactly the same as what you find, in books 1, 2, and 3 inside the omnibus version, which in print form, in 6x9 inch format, is about 680 pages. So it's not a small book, but based on reader reviews anyway, it goes really fast, which is good. Well,
you've got some amazing reviews in the Kindle store. I think I counted 27 at last count, and it's like almost all of them are 5-star reviews. So you've got an outstanding novel, and it's being well received by readers through the Kindle. What is the connective thread between Empire, Confederation, and Final Battle? Is there one major character that moves from one to the next?
Yes, the story really focuses on the main character, Raisa,
mm-hmm.
And he starts out as a young boy, set somewhere in the distant future, of course, in a human-populated universe. And the 3 books basically follow. Empire, for example, follows him as the Kreelan Empire, which kind of plays the bad guys in the series of books, come and invade his home world, and eventually he winds up being captured and taken to live with them and learn how to be like them. Confederation picks up the story whenever Raisa is exiled from the Empire after having basically spent his entire young adult life there. And his integration back into human society. And then the 3rd book, as the name kind of implies, Final Battle, is kind of the climax of the whole thread, the story arc, where basically the Kreelan Empire and the Human Confederation, come into kind of a, huge final conflict, and basically it's up to Raisa to save them both.
It sounds like an outstanding epic fantasy science fiction, the kind of thing that I love. What was the inspiration for Raisa, for the character Raisa?
That's a good question. I guess it's a hard question to answer, because I think part of it, his character is, I think, in some ways what I would like to be. Because I think, in a lot of characters that authors write, there's always a bit of themselves in there. He's not me. I mean, I'm not that good. But he, I like to think that there are elements of me in him. But some of the other characters that come to play, really, I don't know where they came from. They just kind of, sprang out in the story and started running around and getting into trouble. And so that's... because I don't really have models for some of them. I've never known people like some of the characters that appear in the book.
Very cool. Have you been, I take it you have a lot of imagination. Have you been writing most of your life, would you say, at least a little bit here and there? Or was this something that you came to a little bit later?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I was very interested in fiction writing in school, although I actually didn't pursue that very much. Most of my class time was actually spent in Russian, and I've read a lot more at that time. I read a lot more Russian literature than English literature. And then there was a long period of time where I didn't write, and then probably I'd say about 10 years or so after I got out of college, there were some events going on in my life that I needed some therapy, if you will.
Sure.
And I decided, well, I'm going to try writing a novel. And that's whenever I started it, based on an idea that I had originally had back in high school that I hadn't done anything with. And 4 years later, the rough draft was finished.
It's a great story. Can you talk a little bit about your writing process? You said a minute ago that it took you 4 years to write it, right? Altogether.
Right.
We have a lot of Kindle authors and aspiring authors who might watch this video. What is your writing process like? And specifically, what was it like for writing this series of books?
Well, for me, it's kind of I was told by someone on Kindle boards once that I have my writing is very organic, meaning it just kind of flows, I guess, from inside you. I don't use outlines. I don't use a lot of the traditional structural tools.
Sure.
I kind of jokingly say that when I start writing, my fingers just kind of take over, and they're the ones who know the story, and I have no idea what's going on until I actually type it out. And that's really kind of the way it happens for me, although there are times whenever I get kind of mental snapshots of things that happen, like somewhere down the story arc.
Mm-hmm.
But people have asked me that before. Well, how did you plot that out? And it's like, well, I didn't. So.
Well, I think there's definitely two different schools of writers. There's the kind, clearly, that outline meticulously, and then there's writers like you and me that, kind of just fly by the seat of our pants. Maybe we have some idea of where the novel's ultimately going to go or certain plot points along the way, but you don't, necessarily write out the outline for each little place along the highway of writing the book, and you just kind of let it, like you said, organically kind of grow. And I don't think one way is necessarily better than the other. It sort of depends on the writer, really.
Right. I very much agree, because different personality types, I think, tend toward different ways of doing things. Now, I will say though that one danger of doing it the way we do is that the very first draft of In Her Name, whenever I went back to read through it the first time, I absolutely hated the second half of the book.
Mm.
And I completely rewrote it. I mean, I literally threw it away and started from scratch.
Wow.
So I would have been done in 3 years, and that added on an extra year to finish that. And having learned from that a bit, the novel that I'm writing now, which is First Contact, which is a prequel set 100 years before, I'm going through and kind of looking at it chapter by chapter, and I have a few people who are kind of, reading it as kind of ongoing beta readers, just to make sure I don't get too far off track whenever I'm, going through the story thread and save myself some work at the end.
Do you feel like a little bit more, are you more confident as a writer now than when you first wrote, the very first book of this, now that you've written a couple of books?
Oh, absolutely. Even though there's been a long dry spell between when I finished In Her Name and picking up First Contact now, I definitely have learned a lot from that, and I don't worry so much whenever I'm going through the first draft about any grammar issues or anything like that. I just kind of want to see where the story's going, but I kind of have a little voice in the back of my head saying, okay, does this make sense or doesn't it? So I don't get too far off track.
I definitely can look at some of my early novels, Mike, and see some of that. There needed to be an editor there, I think. But
oh yeah, that would help a lot. Yeah. And
now I'm kind of at the stage where I maybe am editing too much. Like I'm too conscious about what I'm doing, and just sometimes it's better just to kind of let it roll and just see what happens, and then go back and edit it later.
Right.
At any rate, now you've done very well on Amazon Kindle with In Her Name. Let me remind folks who are watching us here that the author is Mike Hicks. You write under Michael Hicks. And the book is In Her Name. There's an omnibus edition which is available on Amazon Kindle. So let's talk a little bit about the Amazon Kindle. Specifically, can you discuss your decision to publish In Her Name? Can you discuss the decision to publish In Her Name on Amazon Kindle? What kinds of things were you hoping to accomplish, and what has maybe surprised you the most?
Well, the Kindle actually is what finally got me to publish the book to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever I originally finished the manuscript back in, it was around 94, 95, I tried shopping it around to a number of publishers and, got the usual rejection notices. Now, I didn't pursue that as vigorously as I probably should have at the time, but for various reasons I didn't. But when the Kindle came out, my wife and I are both Kindle owners, and we got this, and then I found out about the digital text platform that Amazon has, as well as the Mobi Pocket integration there. And I've done a lot of web design, so I knew HTML well. I've done a lot of image work with Photoshop and so on. So for me, it was a no-brainer to publish on Kindle.
What has surprised?
From there, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, what has surprised you the most since putting it online? It's been online, a couple of years now? Is that right?
Actually, since April of last year is when it first went up.
Okay, so a little over a year. What has surprised you the most about the success of it, or the response from readers?
Well, first of all, you always hope that people are going to like your work. But to actually see them take the time and write nice things about what you've done, and some of the reader feedback has been really gratifying, and some of the independent reviews equally so. And I think that's been the biggest pleasant surprise. And there really haven't been any unpleasant surprises at this stage. It's all been good. But that and I guess it's also been it's not a surprise, I guess, but it's also been very pleasant to see how much the Kindle has grown. Because when I first put In Her Name in the Kindle store, there were about 80,000 titles. There are now over 300,000. It's
amazing the growth and the popularity. I'm sure you've seen over the past decade or a couple of decades. There have been attempts to create e-readers, but something about Amazon being behind the Kindle and really, pushing it and promoting it, that really created a lot of traction, and now there's momentum. And now, I just found out about this a couple of days ago, this Scribed.com. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yes, I just heard about that recently too, yes.
Simon & Schuster is trying to start a sort of competitive type thing, which is actually, I think, very healthy, because that'll just make the folks at Kindle even that much more thoughtful about creating a better Kindle device, and maybe upping our royalty rates too, which would be nice. Well,
and the thing is, it's a win-win for the authors anyway, because it gives you another venue to offer your books. Because between Kindle, Mobi Pocket, Scribe, and then there are others like Smashwords and the Sony e-reader store and those types of things. The more places you can get your book to,
yes,
the more visibility you have, and that works for everybody.
That's a nice segue into the next question that I had. Aside from the book, In Her Name's being just an extraordinarily well-written novel, what other factors would you say have contributed to its success?
I would have to say that my getting involved with Kindleboards.com was definitely a major positive coincidence at the time that I think really helped it a lot, because whenever I first came on board with that forum site, not long afterward we decided to have like book clubs, online book clubs. And one of the senior folks on there said, well, why don't we have a Read with the Author kind of club? And mine was the first book chosen for that, which was really
awesome.
Both a privilege and, yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun, and I think that kind of started things going that, it's like because then I saw sales starting going up and things like that, and it was just really, really good exposure.
It's got to feel gratifying to actually see those sales and to then begin seeing the reviews coming in. What was it like, for you as an author, say 3 months, maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months after you'd published it? Where were you at kind of emotionally with the book at that point?
Well, it was just making a few sales now and again, and the thing is, I was fine with that because my main goal was to get it published.
Yes.
Because and for me, that was actually not just it wasn't a financial thing or anything like that. It was actually a life goal for me, because I spent, all that time, blood, sweat, and tears writing the book, and it's like, well, now it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just, trips and stumbles and falls on it. They could buy it if they wanted to. And I basically looked at every sale since then as a gift, because the manuscript was sitting under my desk in a box for about 12 years. So just the fact that it saw the light of day at last was great for me.
It's got to be somewhat relieving. Now, tell me a little bit about how your background in the Army Reserves influenced your writing of the book, would you say?
Well, a big part of In Her Name, and actually even a bigger part of the current novel, is what I guess is kind of coined as military science fiction, military SF. Mm-hmm. And, my Army background definitely plays to that, because, you can't help but have experiences like that influence your writing. And it's also, I think, helped a bit, because if you've done something, even if you kind of, tweak it a bit for it to appear, a couple of centuries in the future somewhere, being a soldier or a Marine or a sailor or an airman is something that sticks with you. And I think if you've lived it, you can write about it, or at least people will sense that there's some kind of I don't even know what to call it. Some kind of authenticity there.
Sure,
in your
credibility,
writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that you've had some success with the book on Kindle, are you still exploring traditional publishing options, or are you, set on just publishing the next book, First Contact, on Kindle, or are you going to shop it around a little bit?
I haven't really decided that yet. Part of me wants to try and go ahead and see if I can, get with a major publisher. But one big problem is, for science fiction authors in particular, is that there aren't very many publishers that pick up SF books anymore. Mm-hmm. And, Bain and Tor really are probably the two biggest. So if you don't get them, and you don't get a fairly significant contract, which is pretty unusual for a first-time author, the advantage of going the conventional publishing route really kind of dwindles, because I'm not going to go with a small publisher, because I already am a small publisher and I can do that myself. Sure. And not share the royalties.
Have you tried contacting some of these better known military SF authors like David Weber? Have you tried contacting their agents, the folks who represent them?
No, not directly. Although now that you mention it, that's probably a good idea. I might try that.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't really explored much at this point with First Contact, the traditional route, aside from some very cursory research at this point.
Mm. Well, I would think now that you've had some success, you could definitely show that track record, that it's been on several of the bestseller lists in the science fiction categories, on Kindle Store. That's definitely something to think about. Now, you've also published a how-to book titled Publish Your Book on the Amazon Kindle, A Practical Guide. What was your motivation to do that?
Well, that came about because, especially last year and probably up through early this year, I spent a lot of time in the digital text platform forums on Amazon, trying to help people out who are having problems getting their books published to the Kindle through the DTP method. Because on the surface of it, the process for getting your book published seems like it should be very simple and straightforward. But the reality is that for many people it's not. And after answering a lot of questions and, and trying to help people through their problems, I just said, well, I mean, I'll try to package this experience up as best I can. And I put it in that book and published it. And that too has been pretty popular.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what kind of reader response have you gotten from that?
There haven't been a lot of reviews. I think there are 6 on Amazon. I think they're all 5-star. And I haven't shopped it around to reviewers and so on very much. Although I think Pod Brown did a review of it, but it's not. I make no claim to being the premier Kindle publishing expert. I think Joshua Talent probably rightfully holds claim to that title, but my effort was basically to put something out there that was written by an author for other authors that hopefully would help them over some of the biggest hurdles that they faced.
Now, one personal question. I read from your website that you were perhaps wrongfully diagnosed by a teacher early on as having a reading disability. How did that influence or affect your reading, from age 6 to, say, 16?
Well, that story, actually, my parents were really up in arms about that one, because my mother is she's retired now, but she was also a teacher. And when that report came from I don't know whether it was second grade or some very early grade teacher, they went and said, I think you got your stuff wrong, which I think in fact they did. But all through school, I don't know whether I could necessarily be characterized as a bookworm, but whenever I got into a story, I was lost. And I got yelled at a lot in class, in English class, like in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because, you were supposed to read a passage of a book and then answer some questions on it. The teacher would always have to yell at me because I wouldn't hear her because I would be so lost in the story. So I suddenly, snap out of it to hear my name being yelled and have the teacher standing over me. So, but I mean, reading has very much been a big part of our lives here. As a matter of fact, my oldest stepson, who is just turning 13 in a few days, I just gave him my Kindle because he caught the reading bug just a few months ago and has just been reading like mad. He's read all of the Harry Potter books just like in the last 4 months, and that's a habit that my wife and I really want to encourage. So he has a Kindle now.
That's exciting.
Yeah, he was pretty thrilled with it, and it's really exciting to see him finally turned on to reading. Now we have to get his 10-year-old brother to to step up to the plate.
Oh, he'll be there soon enough. So, one question, one of the things I've noticed a lot of talk on the blogs, I'm sure you've probably seen this a lot too, is there's a lot of debate about the legitimacy of self-publishing, or perhaps a changing, sort of almost like a seascape, change of perception of self-published authors. Certainly, I've seen a lot of that in the 10 or 15 years that I've been knocking around this business. What is your perspective on indie publishing or self-publishing?
Well, I think in many ways, I think indie publishing, could be the key to the future of publishing in general. But there is one, I think the first and foremost problem or obstacle that we as a group have to overcome is the perception of poor quality. And by poor quality, I mean, everything from basic grammar and spelling mistakes to, stories and whatnot that aren't put together very well to, poor or non-existent book covers, everything. And that, I think, is the biggest thing that is holding us as a group back, because I think we're really entering a good window of opportunity here, because the traditional publishers are having a very hard time financially, and I think rightfully so. They have lots of authors submitting, or would-be authors submitting. Mm-hmm. They pick out the ones that they think are going to answer, that are kind of in line with their current thought process on what the public wants. And only a few of the authors that they even pick up actually get much in the way of backing. Now the indie, basically, everything is up to you. You have to do everything. But on the other hand, that gives you total creative control. So I think readers, if they explore the indie publishing world a bit, are going to find books that they can't find anywhere else that they're really going to like.
I totally agree. I think one of the biggest, I don't know if flaw is an awfully strong word, but one of the biggest weaknesses that I've seen in traditional publishing since at least the mid-'90s is that there is this flotsam of aspiring writers, some of whom could very likely be commercially successful authors, and there's not a good system in place for these traditional publishers. We rely on, they rely on literary agents to field the stuff, but even manuscripts being submitted by literary agents, there's just a huge number of them. And I'm of a belief that the publisher who finds a viable way of bringing on aspiring writers in a low risk, meaning low economic in terms of production values, kinds of way of bringing on new talent, that publisher is going to have a competitive edge over their other, over other publishers. And that was one of the things that was so interesting about seeing Scribe.com, because it looks like what they're trying to do, and I have no idea whether it's going to be successful or not, but it looks like they're putting into place a Kindle-esque, publishing avenue for aspiring writers to kind of see what readers will read and what they'll embrace. And if Simon & Schuster's if they have their finger on the pulse of the kinds of writers who are breaking through, like you and like a number of other Kindle authors, through their own imprint, then it seems like that kind of publisher is going to have a competitive edge.
Well, it would make a lot of sense, because the thing is, on the, I've seen a lot of arguments about ebooks, for example, essentially having the same upfront cost as a print book.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be true, but the thing is, if nothing else, if a traditional publisher like that goes out and just takes new authors, for example, and puts them out, even just publishing them to the Kindle store at first, and seeing how they do, and if they start taking off, well, then make a print version. That probably doesn't work well with their marketing paradigm, but that paradigm itself probably has to change, because the industry it's operating on dinosaur principles at this point.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. We'll see. I mean, Simon & Schuster's there right now. Other publishers will follow suit. HarperCollins tried this Harper Studio idea, which is still in place. So I think they're trying to find a way to, the smart publishers are trying to find a way to wed their base, their traditional publishing with distribution of print books, to this new business model of online, low production cost publishing. So what do you think the future holds? Let's say in the next 3 to 5 years for authors like you and like a lot of other Kindle authors. What's the future hold for the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think, for one thing, the e-book segment of the market is going to continue to accelerate, I think, at a geometric pace. If you look at the, not just the Kindle store, for example, the titles that are available there, but Kindle sales, they can hardly make the things fast enough. And it doesn't matter what platform, whether it's, Kindle, Mobi Pocket, Scribe, whatever, even PDF files. I think more and more people are going to go that route because it's, in the long term, it's more economical. It costs less. It's greener because, as much as I love print books, I hate the thought of, cutting down trees and using all the resources to do that. And then, most of the books wind up in the recycling bin or in the dump, at the end of the day. And there are just so many other options that you can have with the electronic format. And I think in the next 10 years or so, I think the ebook segment of the market is going to be the dominant one.
That's really interesting to hear. Yeah, I guess the question I've been wondering is what the ceiling is. It definitely does not seem to be slowing at all at this point.
No.
And like you like you, Mike, I definitely love reading a paperback, but as they get better with the readers, I think people are absolutely going to keep moving towards it, and as more and more titles are made available on the Kindle, I don't know. I'm curious to see what the ceiling will actually be. I don't know what it'll be right now.
I don't think we'll see a ceiling. I think we're going to see a long term. I think the future is the electronic readers. Now, that's not to say that there's going to come a day whenever we won't have print books, because I don't believe that either. I think it's going to be a question of the right tool for the job. But for an increasing number of people, especially the younger generation, like our boys, for example, they're going to grow up in a world where there have always been electronic readers. You've always been able to read a book on your phone.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the world that they live in. Eventually, the schools, for example, you're not going to be hauling a huge pile of textbooks to school with you. You're going to be hauling the Kindle or its future equivalent to school, and that's going to have all of your textbooks on it.
Well, it's just a fascinating idea, and us old fogies, we've seen the paper books, and we remember things on vinyl, so we've been around a while.
And rotary telephones. And
well, I've got one last question for you for the aspiring writers in our audience here tonight. What advice would you give to aspiring writers trying to decide the best way to publish their books?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you want to try a traditional publisher, go for it. But remember that does not preclude you from publishing your book as an independent at the same time, if you wish. There have been people who said that if you publish your book by yourself, it's a kiss of death for a traditional publisher picking you up. I personally don't believe that, because the publishers are in it for the bottom line, for profit. If there's a book out there that somebody publishes on their own that looks to them like it's going to be a hit, if you get the information to them, if you get through all the gatekeepers to the right editors, you're going to get picked up. It's still a lottery, but if you don't play, you can't win. The other thing I would say is that if you do want to publish on your own, the Kindle must be on your list of platforms to publish to. That shouldn't even be a question anymore. You can go the print route however you want, but make sure you're on the Kindle, and also make sure you're on all the other electronic formats. And finally, for someone who does want to go indie, the most important thing I would stress is quality. Quality, 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 because that's why many reviewers will not even touch self-published books, because so many of them are, if you'll pardon my expression, garbage. They're poorly written, poorly edited, and poorly formatted. Get past those problems and make your book so that it would not look out of place on a bookstore shelf. That's what you want to shoot for.
Absolutely. Well, for all of us here at the onlinebookreview.org, I want to thank Mike for joining us. Thank you very much for spending some time with us here tonight.
Well, thanks. It was great. Glad to be here.
Okay. Over and out.
Okay.
So...